Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, let's switch gears to the other, really just interesting loss. I think you would call it an interesting loss on Saturday. I don't think you'd call it a big loss because the team that I want to talk about right now, Texas A&M, they are just not very good. They go to Starkville, Mississippi, and they get absolutely pounded by Mississippi State. In that game, the final score was 42-24. The scary part was Mississippi State didn't even score in the fourth quarter. It means it gave up 42 points over the final three quarters. And what's especially concerning, that defense, which has actually held the fort down over the last couple of weeks, it finally gave way in large part because the offense couldn't stay on the field and sustain drives. And so with the loss, Texas A&M is now 3-2. They easily, by the way, could have lost the last 2 weeks. They were outgained by Miami. Miami had some weird red zone decisions under Mario Cristobal and Josh Gaddis. Last week, we talked about the Arkansas game in which you had the doink on top of the upright. Arkansas obviously was driving in to go up 21-7 in that game, KJ Jefferson's fumble. And so I only bring it up because Texas A&M is 3-2. They easily could be 1-4. Remember after the App State game, we said, this team can be 1-4 if they don't watch out. They're not 1-4, but they are 3-3, and of course, or 3-2. And you know who is next on the schedule, right? They go to Alabama. They are almost certainly going to lose. They are a 20-point favorite or so in the Betfred Sportsbook. And we could have chaos code red situation in College Station because the bottom line is they ain't beating Alabama next week, certainly not the way that they're playing. And they very well could fall to 3-3. And this program is very much on the brink. And so what I want to do now is not really talk about what happened on Saturday because, listen, Mississippi State's a good team. Credit to them, 4-1. They're ranked. I thought their over-under of 6.5 wins was way too low coming into the year. But this is about Texas A&M. We say it all the time. The more interesting story is in the losing locker room. And there is no doubt that the more interesting story is at Texas A&M. And the conversation now has to turn forward of how do you fix this program? $9 million head coach, 4 straight top 10 recruiting classes, and even Texas A&M fans. And I know we got a lot that listen on to this show, follow on YouTube, all that good stuff. Even Texas A&M fans, I don't think there's a doubt that they're sitting there saying nobody is doing nobody is doing less with more talent than Jimbo Fisher. And so what I want to do now, I think there's only, at this point, I believe that there is only one way to fix this program and one way to get it back on track, and it has to happen immediately. And what I want to do is I want to be realistic. I want to be fair, because one thing we do on this show is we don't make up crazy hypothetical. Well, I mean, sometimes I make up a crazy hypothetical, but I give you the caveat of a crazy hypothetical. But I bring it up because the bottom line is, look, Jimbo Fisher's not getting fired. He's owed $80+ million still on his contract. That is one big check even for Texas A&M's boosters. Recruiting is clearly not the issue. Not just the #1 recruiting class in the country last year, but 4 straight classes before it. I don't think anything else is an issue either in terms of resources. They have those. Facilities, they have those. Assistant coaching pool, they have those. And so the question becomes, what do you do and how do you fix this before it completely goes off the rails? And so to me, I think it's actually pretty simple. There's one big problem with Texas A&M. It is their offense. And this falls on not the offense, not the quarterback, not the skill position players, not the O-line. It falls on the play caller, Jimbo Fisher. And I believe that it is time for a guy who has made his entire career of running super, successful offenses dating back to Florida State, dating back to LSU when he was an assistant under Nick Saban. I think it's officially time for Jimbo Fisher to give up play calling duties. And listen, one thing I do, when I say give up play calling duties, I mean, this is the only thing left to do. And I do kind of want to break it down and talk about it a little bit. And what I would say about this is like one thing before we get into the nuts and bolts. Listen, one thing on this show that I never try to do, I never try to be X's and O's guy. You don't hear about me breaking down. I don't go on Twitter and clips, of this, and I'm circling that. And that's not what I do. There are a lot of really good people that cover college football. There are a lot of really good coaches that could explain the nuance of X's and O's, details, and all of that stuff better than I can. And I'm not going to sit here and say you need to change this scheme or run this personnel or whatever. That's not what I'm going to do. But what I do know, what I can see, I got these two things right here. For people who aren't following on YouTube, who aren't listening on YouTube or listening to the podcast, I'm pointing to my eyes. I got these two things right here, and it is very clear that something is broken. And it's not just my eyes that say it, but the stats too. Like, I think we all know Texas A&M's offense is bad. I don't think people realize just how bad this thing actually is, okay? So coming out of the weekend, here are the stats. They rank 105th in total offense out of 131 teams. And I think that number is actually skewed because they put up a lot of yards late against Mississippi State the other on Saturday, and early in the season against Sam Houston State, an FCS team. They put up a lot of yards in that game as well. So you take out those two performances, this is literally one of the worst offenses in college football. 105th in the country in total yards, 101st in passing. Okay, so this blew me away. We talk about all these terrible passing offenses in college football. A&M's worse than just about all of them. They are worse than Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a better passing team right now than Texas A&M. They are worse than Florida. Remember, Anthony Richardson did not have a passing touchdown through the first 3 weeks of the season, and A&M is worse than them. A&M is worse than Notre Dame. Remember, we crushed Notre Dame for 2-3 weeks. This offense is terrible. A&M is worse than them in the passing game. And what really stands out, and I think any A&M fan would say this to you, they just lack those explosive plays. Like, those are the plays that win you games, right? We just talked about Oklahoma, TCU, excuse me. TCU had 5 touchdown plays of 30 or more yards just in that game. Texas A&M for the entire season, I looked this up, I was blown away. They have 7 plays of 30 yards or more. 3 of them came against Sam Houston State, which means that in 4 games against Power 5 or against FBS competition, App State, Miami, Arkansas, and Mississippi State, they have 4 total plays of 30-plus yards. For comparison, TCU had 5 that went for touchdowns on Saturday. Ohio State is averaging 6 per game. Texas A&M is averaging 1, and this from a $9 million a year head coach in Jimbo Fisher. And so you can't blame whatever. You can't blame the quarterbacks. You can't blame, in my opinion, the skill position guys. Evan Stewart, their top wide receiver, was the number 1 wide receiver in high school football last year. Could have played anywhere. He chose A&M. Devin Achane is as good as any running back in college football. The poor guy has no holes because everybody is just stuffing the box because they know they can't beat you vertically. And so to me, it flat out falls on Jimbo Fisher. This offense, it just looks outdated and archaic. And I believe it just needs to be changed. And it's funny because over the last couple of days, I've seen a lot of this, Jimbo only won because of Jameis Winston. No. Jimbo's offense at one point was actually probably pretty cutting edge and certainly very efficient. Keep in mind, it wasn't just Jameis Winston. E.J. Manuel was a first-round pick under Jimbo Fisher's watch. Christian Ponder was a first-round pick under Jimbo Fisher's watch. So it's not as though, like, this offense always stunk and Jameis Winston saved them for 2 or 3 years. No, this offense was at one point really effective. But if you watch it now, it just feels so outdated, so boring, so slow. And you watch everybody else in college football, and it's like, man, they don't have nearly the talent that A&M does. But you watch TCU on Saturday, 60 whatever points. Ole Miss, USC. Now, those teams have probably, somewhat comparable talent to Texas A&M. But don't blame it on the quarterbacks. Don't tell me that Jimbo can't find the right quarterback. This falls on the head coach. And that's why I think it's time to give it up. And I know what people say, oh, he's $9 million a year. He's stubborn. He's this, he's that. But I'll tell you, it wouldn't be the first time a successful head coach has given up play calling duties on his side of the ball. And I think at his age, you probably should. One, you've been doing it your way for 30 years. I get it. But things change, schemes change, people change, personnel change, style of play changes. And you just look at A&M, it just feels so outdated. And so when you look across the board in college football, yeah, maybe Lincoln Riley at 38, 39 can still call plays and run his program. Maybe Ryan Day, about the same age, can do the same. But Jimbo Fisher's about to be 57 years old. And I just think the wear and tear of being a full-time head coach in the SEC, I don't think you can be the play caller too. Think about everything Jimbo Fisher has to do. Media. He's got to do booster club appearances. He's got to be the face of recruiting, close on all, 25 guys that you're recruiting. Other coaches have regions and parts of the country that they recruit in position groups. Jimbo's got to be the guy that closes on all. I just think it's too much. And when you look at the history of college football, there's a lot of really good coaches that have kind of hit this crossroads. I think it's easy to forget now. But Urban Meyer, late in his career, go back to those Ohio State years. The final few years, that offense got really, really, really stagnant. They started losing weird games. They struggled to move the ball. Poor JT Barrett. It was just, read option this, and eventually what happened? He had to give up the offense. He had to trust Ryan Day, and then it took off like fireworks. It's been one of the most explosive offenses in college football since. You go back, Bob Stoops late in his career had to hand over the offense to Lincoln Riley. Jim Harbaugh had to hand over the offense to his assistant coaches because at some point you realized you can't just run right at the opposing team. You need to add new elements to it. I would add Dabo Swinney. You know what he is? He's the CEO head coach that I'm pushing for Jimbo Fisher to be. Dabo focuses on recruiting. He focuses on selling the program, and he pays people very well, most notably Brent Venables up until this year, to run each side of the football so that he doesn't have to be hands-on. He doesn't have to make every decision, and certainly every decision on game day. Coach O, by the way, was a CEO head coach. You can talk about the way that it ended, but when it clicked with Joe Brady as the play caller and Dave Aranda as the defensive coordinator, it clicked and they won a national championship. So don't tell me he's too stubborn. Don't tell me he's too highly paid. Don't tell me this offense is the reason that he's there. Because whatever it once was, whatever led him to success in 2002 at LSU, and 2014 at Florida State, in 2013 when he won a national championship, it's not working right now. You need new ideas. You need a new person. It's time for Jimbo Fisher to give up the play calling duties. Let somebody else do it. Be the head coach. Be accountable for all 85 guys. Coach the coaches. Because, again, something has to change at Texas A&M, at least for right now. Jimbo Fisher is nowhere near on his way out. And that's one thing, right? I see all these, you got to fire him. The boosters will pay the money. The boosters aren't paying $80 million this year. I don't know how bad it would have to get, and I don't know how quickly it would have to get that bad, but Jimbo Fisher isn't going anywhere for a while. But I do think this is a move you have to make because we live obviously in a now society. We live in a transfer portal era where players, Evan Stewart, number one wide receiver in America last year, he doesn't have to sit around and deal with this for 3 years. He can transfer tomorrow. We can't transfer tomorrow. He can transfer after the season. Go to Texas, go to USC, go to Alabama. You think there aren't people, and I'm not accusing any of those 3 schools. You think there aren't people reaching out to Evan Stewart's parents and Evan Stewart himself and Evan Stewart's family saying, hey, you'd look a lot better in our uniform catching passes for us than you do at A&M? So I'm just telling you, this is a move that Jimbo Fisher has to make. Frankly, I think it's the only move that he can make to save the Texas A&M football program.